So you've watched the other videos of the Porsche 997 turbo tuning that I've been talking about, and you've already done some of the good mods that you need to, but now it's time to get this vehicle handling. The Porsche 997 turbo is the best chassis that I could think of for the ultimate street and track car with some new age technology, but still keeping it a little bit raw. It's a very simple recipe to get better handling out of these all-wheel drive machines. Even if you get 700 horsepower or you still have the stock 480 horsepower, doing a couple mods to the suspension for your 997 turbo will drastically change the way it looks and handles. All-wheel drive cars typically are very safe to drive because, well, all wheels are spinning. This means you have less likely a chance to over-rotate and spin out like the old school 911 turbos from the 930 days. With the 997 turbo, you gotta find a good balance between oversteer and understeer. Now, oversteer is the action where the rear end comes out and you go into a drift. And understeer is when you go into a turn, but you keep pushing towards the outside. So you want to find the balance of keeping that nice and neutral. With a neutral balanced car, handling is so much more improved. You feel safer, you feel stronger, and you feel like you can tackle anything from the track to the mountain roads. So let's talk about the best mods to do for your suspension on your 997 turbo. Now you can apply these to different cars as well. You can take this into account for different Porsches, including 996 turbos or 991 turbos, or any all-wheel drive car. This is my methodology and what I've used for years in my own cars and what I believe is the best to do. So first up, it comes to the coilovers. There's a huge variety of coilovers out there for cars, including the Porsche chassis. Now, on the 997 turbo, since this is all-wheel drive, you have to get specific turbo or all-wheel drive coilovers. If you have Carrera coilovers, they don't fit the same because the front knuckles are different. The 997 turbo comes with PASM or PASM. This is the Porsche Stability Management System. And this basically has a little sensor on the top of each shock, and you're able to press that PASM button and it'll automatically stiffen or soften the shock. However, this isn't the best. And because this is such early technology, it's easy to remove this and going with a better coilover system. Now, I've always liked running KW coilovers. KW coilovers are built, designed, race tested all in Germany. They're one of the few companies that actually put the entire car on a 7-post shock dyno and test to see where those wheels are out and handle. In fact, for years, KW has been involved with the 24 Hours of Nürburgring race to show how strong their coilovers are. Now, the V3s are my coilover of choice, and let me tell you why. Although KW has a range of V1s to V4s, the V3 is the sweet spot. This coilover has separate rebound and compression. Unlike cheaper coilovers that have just 26-way, 32-way, 872-way adjustment, you're truly able to independently adjust the rebound and the compression. Now, what is rebound and what is compression? Well, compression is how the shock goes like this, or compresses, and how stiff that is. And rebound is how fast it comes back up. If a shock rebounds too quickly, well, you really lose that tire grip. And if its compression is too hard, then let's be honest, it's not going to ride too well. The KW V3 also is a monotube shock design. That means inside the shock absorber, this piece is actually a single tube. So it's much more rigid than the cheaper coilovers that's a twin tube design. Rigidity is super important. So besides having independent adjustable rebound and compression and having the monotube shock, these also have a third spring. Now you might look at it and say, well, I see a standard spring and I see a helper spring. Nope, that's because KW has a patented bump stop material that acts like a third spring. And this gives the car an incredible drive on the street and then performs when you need it. KW is known for using a progressive spring rate on the front and then a standard spring rate on the rear. The helper springs do the job of absorbing those very, very little bumps that come on from the smallest of micros of gum in the street, right? And then that main spring is what really does it. They've already done all the engineering to test what the best spring rate is for this vehicle. This isn't just grabbing any spring that's on the rack and putting it on. This is a spring rate or the progressive rate spring designed specifically for this shock, mounted and matched to the shock absorber. The KW Variant 3 has all these great features, so it is a simple plug and play to the car. Now, if you go back when I said PASM and the little sensors, this is the one thing you got to take into account. You're going to then delete the PAS system. And that's because, well, you don't need it. You're going to really dial in that rebound and compression probably once, to be honest with you. But if you go to the track a lot and you're driving on different tires and different sway bar settings, then you can adjust this more to dial in how that car handles. So to delete the PASM system, there's a couple different ways. A simple Google search will show you how to do it using a Durametric tool or an old PWiz tool, or KW also sells a delete kit. And once this is deleted, there's no lights on, there's no issues, you can just drive your car as normal. The KWs are designed to use the factory strut tops, the hard rubber strut tops that come factory on the car. There are some companies that make aftermarket camber plates as well as rear pillowball mounts. The Porsche 997 Turbo has some adjustment already, so you can get some negative degrees up front when you do the alignment. But let's go into the other suspension components and you can see where you can further enhance that. Now, besides the awesome KW V3 coilovers, another great mod to do is the sway bars. Now, remember when I talked about oversteer and understeer? An all-wheel drive car inherently has a little bit of understeer. It will push. And so when you're going into turns hard, depending on the tires that you're running, depending on the tire pressure that you're running, that car might push and not come where you want. Well, you can balance it out with a good set of sway bars. Yes, the car already has sway bars, but adjustable ones will give you more handling performance. Now, H&R makes a great front sway bar, has a 3-hole adjustment, and the rear has a 2 or 3-hole adjustment as well. These sway bars fit with new bushings and mount directly up to the chassis, and then you can connect the factory sway bar links or use aftermarket sway bar links. Because these sway bars have a bigger diameter and more adjustment, you usually want to go with an aftermarket sway bar link that has spherical rod ends. Then you can adjust these out and reach the further hole as need be. Now, when I've run sway bars on my past 997 Turbo, I tend to like a little bit more oversteer like a rear-wheel drive car, but with the safety of the front pulling through. Now, where you can set that is on the rear is closer to the bend. The inside of the bend of the sway bar is stiffer, and closer to the end of the sway bar edge is where it's softer. So you can always start in the middle of that 3-hole and then go and test on the inside or the outside. Now, the front sway bar, again, it's the same concept. Closer to the inside of the bend is stiffer, to the edge is softer. And again, you can go and start in the middle, or you can go for that softer outside setting. Because it's softer, remember the sway bar is already thicker, so you have a stiffer sway bar that's functioning over the stock one. This is a perfect way to balance out the handling of the car so you get a neutral feeling. You've already done these KW V3s, and so the car's already handling on rails and has a lower center of gravity. So the sway bars are the next step to go with. Now, another suspension mod that a lot of guys do is the rear dog bones or rear upper control arms. The factory control arms have a rubber bushing and they look like a dog bone. New ones are a straight piece of billet aluminum with spherical rod ends on either side, reverse ends, and you can move these in or out. There's 2 on each side. So you have a total of 4 dog bones that allow you to adjust the camber and the toe of the car. Now, when you adjust these dog bones, if you pull them in, you're going to get increased camber, but you have to adjust the toe as well. The factory only has so much adjustment in the centric bolts. So these new dog bones allow you to get way more adjustment in camber and toe since you've brought down the car and lowered it. And since you've gotten rid of the factory rubber mounts, you now have a stiff, solid spherical rod end that keeps more rigidity in the car. These sometimes can be a little bit noisier, but for those wanting the ultimate handling, this is definitely an item to go with. Now you've got the coilovers, you got the sway bars, and you got the rear control arms. What's next? Another option to do to improve the handling if you want to really dial in that front camber is switching to the GT3 front control arms and the insert bushings. You can do just the bushings, which will give you a certain amount of caster adjustment as well, but really is these front bushings that can either go on the factory arms or the GT3 arms give you more rigidity. Anytime you get rid of a rubber bushing and you put an aluminum mount in there, it's a lot stiffer and more responsive. The factory GT3 control arms are 2 pieces. You've got the main part here that bolts onto the chassis, and you've got this piece that bolts onto the wheel, and they slide together. Now what Porsche Motorsport sells is different shims, and that shim will then space it out. And when you're spacing it out, it is changing the angle and bringing in that camber. So that's another way to get more camber and adjustability is by doing the front control arms. The last suspension piece that you want to consider if you're looking to do the basic overall package of all the good suspension upgrades is the toe links. Much like the dog bones that go like this, you have the toe links that control the amount of toe that the car has. These are specific to the toe and nothing else. This is the same thing as the dog bone, where it has a spherical rod end and an adjustable machined aluminum piece that goes directly into the hub. Now these toe links allow you to increase that toe so you can really change the position of the wheels. All of these parts are really good upgrades, but they require one thing, and that's a proper alignment. None of this stuff works unless the car is really aligned specifically for what you want to do. You can run all these parts on a street car and have a good tire like a Michelin or a Pirelli or a Toyo. If you're gonna do some serious track events and you're going to do something like an R compound, like a Toyo R888 or a Michelin Pilot Cup, then you can really get more aggressive on your camber settings. That way the car really leans and holds depending on how aggressive you're driving. At the end of the day is when you look at these different suspension components, you want to choose what's best for you. You don't have to do them all at once, though I do highly recommend doing the coilovers and the sway bars to begin with. Because I'm talking about the all-wheel drive car, as these parts will also work for a 997 Turbo or Carrera 4. But you can put the same logic to the 997 Carrera two-wheel drive cars. You would just want to not increase the oversteer too much because it already is rear-wheel drive and it does have oversteer from the factory. So if you have more questions on how to set up your suspension and what are the best parts to get for your car, go ahead and visit us at vividracing.com and drop us a comment or contact one of our specialists and we'll help you get the suspension parts you need to achieve the goals that you want. All right guys, thanks for watching this tech tip from us here at Vivid Racing. We will see you at the next one.